you have somebody in the Oval Office telling his or her side of the story, the other person needs to go in and speak up for him or herself. So, this is moving fairly quickly. They're talking about hearings in the spring, a report sometime in the fall before the midterms. So it's moving.
And David, again, as Willie said, for Steve Bannon, there are 10 people that worked in the Trump White House. That regardless of what our viewers may think about Donald Trump or people who worked in Trump's White House, they were there thinking they were doing the nation's bidding, and they were doing it better than the person who would follow them. Well, there are a lot of those people who woke up on January the 6th, saw what happened, were horrified, and are patriots and don't want to see these people getting away with it. And we're actually starting to hear from some of Trump's most loyal Republican followers talking about bringing justice to those who beat up cops on January the 6th. We weren't hearing that 2 weeks ago.
It's a relentless process. We've needed an Inspector Javert, if people remember Les Miserables, who just pursues the case ceaselessly. And this committee is proving to have that relentless, careful, step-by-step accretion of evidence. I think Elizabeth is right. They're looking at a conspiracy, but they're putting the evidence together, as you say, starting with the loyal, lower-down people thought were loyal to Trump, who've decided that they have responsibility to share this information. And, this is not a circus. It's not on television. It's, we don't see it every day on cable news, but day by day, they get more stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where this needs to go.
Looks like, Willie, more than 6 more weeks of winter for Donald Trump and those who really were involved in a conspiracy on January the 6th.
Yeah, a lot of people seeing their shadows, aren't they, right now? Let's talk about some of these new developments. New memos obtained by the New York Times appear to show the origin of the Trump campaign's plan to create fake slates of electors designed to help Donald Trump overturn the 2020 election. According to that new reporting from the Times, one memo issued 15 days after Election Day show how the Trump campaign sought to buy itself more time to overturn the results. Quote, at the heart of the strategy, the Times reports, was the idea that their real deadline was not December 14th, when official electors would be chosen to reflect the outcome in each state, but January 6th, when Congress would meet to certify the results. The memos, according to the Times, initially were meant to address Trump's challenge in Wisconsin, but ultimately became part of a broader strategy to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to block the certification of Joe Biden's win. For some context to this reporting, one elections expert, a guy named David Becker, tweeted this, quote, important to note that the same day the Trump campaign sent a memo to Wisconsin seeking to overturn the will of Wisconsin voters, November 18th, was the deadline for Trump to demand a statewide recount, which he declined to do. It was 2 weeks before Wisconsin's deadline to certify the election. In essence, what this reporting demonstrates is that Trump was trying to overturn results that weren't even certified yet, and which he didn't think were worthy of statewide recounts. So, Joe, this is just 2 weeks, after the election. Donald Trump, just explicitly, according to these memos in his campaign, trying to put different people in place who would change the results of the vote.
I mean, you couldn't be any more clear on Donald Trump's intent here. I mean, it is such a scam, and Wisconsin reveals him for the scam artist that he is. Just like he was talking about rigged elections in the summer of 2020 when he knew he was going to lose the election. 6 months before the election, or 5 months before the election even took place. Here, Jonathan Lemire, Donald Trump is seeking an alternate set of electors, despite the fact he didn't challenge the voting for a recount, and it was even before those recounts were certified. So he didn't know what the results were going to be. He didn't care what the results were going to be. He knew that he lost on Election Day, so the only thing he cared about was, or he lost from the votes cast on Election Day and the absentee ballots. And so he was, no matter what, he was just going to claim it was rigged and put up these scam set of electors.
Yeah, it was a months-long process to sow seeds of doubt about the integrity of the election. All summer long in 2020, we heard him rail against mail-in ballots, even though, to that point, a lot of Republicans and a lot of older voters opted to use those ballots against the advice of his aides. He said, well, mail-in ballots are going to be a means to fix the election. We can't trust them, because he knew that Democrats were encouraging their voters to do so because of the pandemic, to not stand in line. So there was that. We have this here. He didn't bother with a recount, but they simply wanted to install new sets of electors. Those new electors weren't going to suddenly hand him the White House, but they were going to add more confusion. They were going to perhaps delay the process there in the middle of December, when the Electoral College was to meet, because they wanted on January 6th for them to present this idea. Hey, there's confusion here. The 7 battleground states that all, incidentally, went for Joe Biden, we can't trust their results, so let's toss them out. That was the plan outlined by John Eastman in those memos. We can't trust those 7 states. Mike Pence, presiding over the ceremony, tosses them out. And if you go with the other 43 states, hey, Donald Trump wins. He's got more. He doesn't have 270, but he'd have more than Joe Biden at that point. That was the plan. As far-fetched as it may seem, that was what they were trying to do as the coup. There was no legitimate means to contest the elections. It was all about him simply trying to maintain power.
Well, and again, what were they doing? Look at the states where he was claiming that there were scam results. Wisconsin had a Republican legislature. Pennsylvania had a Republican legislature. Michigan had a Republican legislature. We said on this show months ahead of time, count it election day, count all of the votes election day, because there was a proposal to do it like Florida does, or else this is exactly what's going to happen. And it happened. Florida, another swing state, had a Republican legislature. Georgia had a Republican legislature. I mean, and a Republican Secretary of State and a Republican governor. Again, this is Donald Trump. And this all shows intent, that it was just a scam from the very beginning.